Happy New Year. Today marks the first of our virtual mental health platform series for 2021. I hope you have all coped with COVID-19 and survived the vicissitudes of life thus far and are willing to continue in spite of, because this new normal will be here with us for a very long time. To contend with this alteration to our lives, a directory of the Mental Health Psychosocial Support Network of Services, of which we are a part, has been launched for use by all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So utilize it and tell your friends and family about it. It is entitled Find Care TT. On our program today, we feature a Trinbagonian who now leads the world's largest group of psychology scholars, educators, clinicians, and students. This newly elected president of the 121,000-member American Psychological Association is Frank C. Worrell. Frank C. Worrell, PhD, is a professor in the Graduate School of Education at the University of California, Berkeley, where he serves as faculty director of the school psychology program, the academic talent development program, and the California College Preparatory Academy. He also holds an affiliate appointment in the social and personality area in the Department of Psychology. His areas of expertise include at-risk youth, cultural identities, gifted education and talent development, scale development, time perspective, and the translation of psychological research findings into school-based practice. He has authored more than 200 academic publications, and most recently, he co-edited the Cambridge Handbook of Applied School Psychology. From 2012 to 2014, he served as co-editor of the journal Review of Educational Research. From 2015 to 2016, he served as editor of the journal Review of Educational Research. From 2016 to 2018, he was a member at large on the board of directors of the American Psychological Association. Dr. Worrell is a fellow of the American Educational Research Association, the Association for Psychological Science, and 5 divisions of the American Psychological Association. He is an elected member of the Society for the Study of School Psychology and the National Academy of Education. In 2013, he was a recipient of the Distinguished Scholar Award from the National Association for Gifted Children. He was also a 2015 recipient of the Distinguished Contributions to Research Award from the Division 45, the Society for the Psychological Study of Culture, Ethnicity, and Race of the American Psychological Association. A 2018 recipient of the Outstanding International Psychologist Award from Division 52, International Psychology of the American Psychological Association, and the 2019 recipient of the Palmerium Award in Gifted Education from the Moorgridge College of Education at the University of Denver. Dr. Worrell has international collaborators in China, Ethiopia, Germany, Iran, Italy, Japan, New Zealand, Nigeria, Peru, Poland, Slovenia, Sweden, Turkey, the United Kingdom, and Uruguay. He is the 2021 president-elect of the American Psychological Association, and he will serve as the American Psychological Association president in 2022. It is my pleasure to present you Professor Frank C. Worrell, Trinbagonian, of whom we are justly proud, to address us this afternoon. Over to you, Frank.
Thank you. I'm going to begin with sharing my screen. I only have about 3 slides, and they'll be all for most of the talk. But just wanted to start. So I'll need permission from the host to share the screen.
Sure.
Yes, you should have permission already.
It's actually not. It's saying it's disabled.
Okay.
But while they're working on that, I'd like to thank Wendy Jeremy and the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists for the invitation to speak to you today. I have been a member of TTAP for several years, so I'd like to think that I'm speaking to my own in multiple ways: Trinbagonians, TTAP members, psychologists in training. I also have to acknowledge that we are living in difficult times. I'm speaking to you via Zoom, as travel is not possible. So even if I had wanted to be in Trinidad, I could not.
Hi, John. Hi, dear. Uh-huh.
Just a minute.
I cleaned out a closet. I didn't even ask her, did she want it? I just threw it out. That was it. Do you think she can't wash the bed with the wheels? Would you ever have wheels on it? Yeah.
So, yeah, so we've got the thing working. So my best wishes to everybody who's been personally affected or touched by COVID-19, directly or indirectly. In fact, just an hour ago, I was attending my brother-in-law's funeral. He died of COVID-19 a little over a week ago. But as I've said to my students, we need to take care of ourselves in this time, because the need for psychologists to help others has never been greater. Not just in providing counseling and therapy to those in mental distress, but also in showing that we need to continue living as best as we can as we try to get a handle on this dreaded disease. So developmental psychologists, school psychologists, media psychologists, in fact, all of our skills and stuff are being called upon in these times. People who are, how do we motivate kids online, right? And I am struck that the death toll in the United States, where I currently reside, is actually represents 1/3 of the population of Trinidad and Tobago. That's how many people have died in this country, and that we know of, because we suspect that there are many people who have died of COVID-19, but who were not counted. And so as we as psychologists have to show others that you play with the hand that you are dealt. And so my talk today, the title, From Richmond Street Boys to the Presidency of the American Psychological Association, A Talent Development Journey. So it's sort of a bit of a personal talk, and I'm doing this to showcase the fact that not that I am anything special, but that in fact, if we do things the right way, sometimes things work out. We can't guarantee it. But if we work hard, the probability of us getting better, getting to where we'd like to get to, is greater. And so I'm going to start with a model that we have done, some colleagues and I did, called the Talent Development Mega Model. In 2008, a colleague of mine, Rena Zabotnik, got an invitation to submit an article on gifted education to a journal called Psychological Science in the Public Interest. This journal publishes review articles that summarize a field, the state of evidence in a field. Yes, she invited me and another colleague, Paula, to write with her, and it was published in 2001. And this is the model. And what we had done is we had reviewed the entire set of evidence. And what we did is we are talking about the fact that with kids, what you're doing is you're starting with potential, right? You're starting with potential, and that moves into achievement, and then potentially sometimes some people get to eminence, right? So in the United States, we have Super Bowl going on today. Tom Brady, is an eminent footballer, right? I'm going to date myself. I've not been keeping up with Trinidad, but Shaka Hislop was an eminent footballer in the true sense of football, what football really is, not American football, in Trinidad, at one point, right? And so this idea that we are moving on a journey from potential to achievement, and then some few are going to get to eminence. And that involves creativity. We start off with identifying people. We are working with kids, and then we are teaching them to do things, process. How do you work? And then product, because as an adult, you are judged not on how high your IQ score is or how many A-level subjects you got, or even on the fact that you got a degree. But what are you actually doing? The products that you are giving to society in whatever field that is, be it engineering where you're doing a bridge, or medicine where you're doing surgery. And so that journey involves work. And for us to engage in work, we've got to sort of enjoy it. So Benjamin Bloom of Bloom's taxonomy talks about the fact that the earliest teachers need to teach us something, teach us to fall in love with the subject. Because that falling in love, that passion is what keeps us going when the going gets tough, when things get a little bit harder. And then ultimately teaching for technique, and finally mentoring for a personalized niche as you become. So those of you who are academics, those of us who become academics, become an expert in some domain. Somebody becomes a talented footballer, basketballer, a talented radio announcer, and so forth. They have their own style. And there are a number of things that help us along the way and that hurt us, right? Low motivation hurts us, unproductive mindsets, low level of psychological strength, right? So those are things that hurt us. And when I say psychological strength, I mean the willingness to take risks, the ability to accept feedback and not let it derail you, right? Those kinds of things. On the other hand, there are things that help us. Openness to feedback, taking opportunities when they come, being a risk taker, having developed social skills. A number of years ago, I'm into classical music a lot. A number of years ago, one of the leading sopranos, she was getting up there in years, but she was fired by the Met. And she was fired by the Met because they decided, we now have younger sopranos who can sing those roles just as good, but who are not divas and who are not treating people badly. So that in fact, social skills matter. So this is an updated version of the model that we just published in a chapter that came out last year. And one we're showing is that, so you start off with content knowledge and skills, and everybody needs content knowledge and skills. But as you progress along the talent development pathway, it's not that content knowledge and skills go away. They become less important because other people have the content knowledge and skills that you have. And so that's where your psychosocial skills, your mental skills, your risk-taking, your perseverance, your social skills, getting along with others, and the insider knowledge, understanding what you need to do, become more important relatively on the trajectory. And so that you need to take opportunities throughout your career. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and dive into the journey with you and stuff. And I will hope that you will see how this model applies not just to me, but I think more generally, and how it can be used. And we'll have some time for questions. Now, my parents' lives reflected this model. Of course, I couldn't know that at the time. My father was born in Toko, pulled out of primary school, middle of primary school, and apprenticed to a cobbler, right? And so he did not finish primary school. Now, he was very good at fixing shoes, which was not very good for us as kids. We did not have a lot of money, but it did not help that every time we felt we needed new shoes because the soles were not good, he would actually repair the soles. So we didn't get new shoes. We just got refurbished shoes because my father would refurbish them, right? But he moved to Port of Spain and he wrote a basic skills exam when the police force was expanding and they were encouraging people to come. And he actually passed that basic skills exam, some reading and writing and arithmetic, and became a policeman. He entered as a constable, the lowest level, and he retired as a corporal. He only got one promotion because he did not have any other education, right? But he still got much higher than he would have gotten if he had not tried, he'd not taken that basic skills exam for the police force. My mom was born in an even smaller village than my dad. She was born in Grand Riviere. She actually finished elementary school and was kept on by the elementary school teacher as an assistant because she was considered bright. And he helped her prepare to take the entrance exam into the teacher's college. And so she got into Mossicle Teachers College and became a primary school teacher and retired as a principal. So this idea, again, of working and doing the work, and if you do that work, ending up higher than you would otherwise be, I think became a sort of philosophy in my household. For my mom, it was aim for the stars and always do your best. And I'll come back to that, but always do your best. To aim for the stars was not a pie in the sky, aim for the stars. If you aim for the stars, you're going to do well. Mom used to say, if you aim for the stars, you may not get there, but if you aim for the stars and then you miss, you have a chance to land in the treetops. If you only aim for the treetops and the miss, you land in the mud. And so this idea of aiming as high as you can go, right? And my dad was big into responsibility and duty. He was a cop. One night he came home, 2 in the morning, he woke me up. I was 17 and a half years old. I just started driving and I'd gotten the old family car because my mom did not drive. And my father said to me, you did not lock your car. Now, this car was such that nobody would steal this car. In fact, this car was so old it could crank. You could crank it to start it. It was old and heavy. My friends used to call it the Model T. So I said to my father, but you are parked behind me, so nobody can take the car. And my father said to me, if you intend to be driving that to school tomorrow, you will get up and go and lock it now. And I got up and I went and I locked the car, because if I did not, I would not have been driving to school the next day. I would have been taking taxi. That's so that was my household, those philosophies. So went through elementary school, started at St. Hilda's. We were when I was born, we lived on 14A Irving Lane, that was behind what was called behind the bridge at the time. And I went to St. Hilda's, and they took boys only in Infant 1 and Infant 2, and then I went to Richmond Street Boys, where I was there from Standard 1 to about Standard 3, middle maybe Standard 4. But I was doing pretty well in school, not working very hard because I had good potential. I was in class all the time. My parents made sure we did our homework. And so I was doing pretty okay in everything except arithmetic. And so my parents moved me to St. Crispin's on Aria Peter Avenue, Standard 4, because the teacher there, they knew the principal and the math teacher there. The Standard 5 teacher gave lessons after school to prepare me for common entrance. So I passed for St. Mary's College. I was one of 500 students who got a $24 scholarship in that year. It was 1972. And again, here's the role of chance. Only after I got into St. Mary's did I discover that you not only had to make the cut, but you had to actually choose St. Mary's as your number one choice on that selection form. I was not Catholic. So, so St. Mary's was not, I wasn't going to St. Mary's because it was a Catholic school, but because at the time it was considered the top school for boys, and that's where I wanted to go. And so I got into St. Mary's, and that started off well enough. I continued to pay attention in class, but continued not to study. And this served me in good stead until Form 5, right? Because as you know what happens, you have exams coming up and cramming doesn't quite work. I passed 7 of my 8 subjects, but did not do well enough to get into Form 6 at St. Mary's. I did well enough to get into Form 6 at other schools, and several of my friends left and went to Trinity and other places. But rather than leave, I chose to repeat Form 5, not because of St. Mary's per se, but because of music. Wendy did not say it, but she and I go back to the I guess it would have been the 70s when we were in secondary school. We were in a recorder ensemble together, right?
Quite right.
And so I stayed at St. Mary's because of the choir, not because of the academics. I stayed for the choir, right? It kind of paid off because I repeated Form 5, did well enough to get into Form 6 at St. Mary's, and then the choir got to go to Austria between Form Lower 6 and Upper 6, so that paid off. But 2 pivotal events occurred in that time frame. One was sort of personal family, and one had to do with school. The first was, as I said, my mother didn't drive, and I was taking her and a friend to a meeting. And so I'm being the chauffeur. She and her friend are sitting in the back seat. And her friend says, so what do you want Frank to do when he finishes with school? And I'm sitting there driving and rolling my eyes and saying, why would you ask that question? You know, and stuff. And my mother said something that was incredibly remarkable. I have never forgotten it. My mother said, Frank can do whatever he wants to do. I really don't care. But whatever he does, he needs to do it well. So if we are walking in Port of Spain, and you say to me, oh my God, look how clean this street is. I've never seen any street in Port of Spain so clean. I need to be able to say to you with pride, my son cleans this street. That is why it is so clean. And I remember thinking, yeah. If I become a street cleaner, she'll actually have a fit. But the message was not about the job itself. The message is about how you did the job. Now, that didn't say that I'd learned the importance of those lessons. I kept hearing them all the time, but that didn't say. So I didn't study in A-levels. I mean, I hadn't learned the lesson from O-levels. And again, exams came, I did my A-levels, and I passed everything. I got all 4 subjects, but I didn't do very well. And so when I got home with my results, my father, as I said, who had been pulled out of elementary school, called everybody together to drink a toast. I was the third of 4 kids. My 2 older sisters had not gone to A-levels. They had actually not, I think each of them got 1 O-level, right? So I was the first to go to A-levels. And my mother came into the room, and this was a second pivotal event. She said, I'm not drinking a toast. I have nothing to celebrate. And I knew where she was coming from. And my father said, what do you mean? And she said, Frank did not do his best. He knows it, and I know it. And she left the room. And I vowed at that point that my mother would never be able to say that about me again. Because I've always said my mother's one of the best psychologists, because if she had ranted and raved and got me feeling guilty and angry, anger would have trumped the guilt. But she was quiet, not accusatory, just matter of fact. And so there was no anger, and so the guilt was maximum. She knew exactly what she was doing. Anyway, my father told me, find a university that will accept you. I know you want to do music, find a university that will accept you and I'll find the money. And my mom expressed skepticism that I would be committed to further schooling. But I let Dad know that I wanted to study English and psychology. And he said, okay, same thing applies. Find a university and I'll find the money. UWI didn't offer psychology at the time, and so I ended up going to Canada, looking at Canada because it was cheaper than the US and the UK. And I applied to Canada, and they had a system similar to what had happened at Common Entrance. You filled out in Ontario, you filled out what your 3 top schools were in rank order. And I put the University of Toronto #1 because that's where I wanted to go. I had gone on a YMCA exchange to Toronto, and so I had a sort of a Canadian family there who were very supportive. And they had suggested I put University of Western Ontario as #2. That was a good school. But I was convinced, I'm going to go to the University of Toronto. But the University of Toronto, with the top school in Canada, did not take me. I ended up getting into Western. And so I was disappointed. But it's one of those chance events that I think turned out to be one of the best things, because I'm convinced that I'm sitting here today talking to you as president-elect of the American Psychological Association because of the training that I got at Western. For the record, I got a letter on Friday from the current president of Western, congratulating me on my accomplishment and saying that he and the whole social science faculty are proud of me, which was kind of interesting. So, I mean, they found my address. So I entered Western, I worked hard. Psychology was taught as a science from the introductory class, and I liked the subject. I did well enough in the first year to pick up a $1,000 scholarship to help with tuition, which was great because my father had retired from the police force and was working 2 jobs to put me through school. Mom took over the household expenses and he was putting me through school. In the fall of my second year, my father called and said, there's this thing in the paper about a Commonwealth scholarship and you should apply for it. And I told him, I said, well, Dad, actually, I applied already once and they didn't give it to me. They typically give it to graduate students. I mean, so I'm an undergrad, they're not going to give it to me. And he said, well, I want you to apply anyway. He's paying my tuition. I applied. Now, I asked 3 of my professors from freshman year to write me letters of recommendation. My psychology professor, my English professor, I was doing English and psychology, and my anthropology professor. I'd gotten A's in all 3 classes, and because I'd worked very hard in those classes. Mom, as I said, Mom couldn't say that about me again. I used to sit in the 3rd row center in the auditorium for the psychology class. There were over 300 people in that classroom. So he knew me because I was sitting front and center, and there were not a lot of Blacks in the room. I used to sit in the 2nd row center in English class. And I used to sit at the back of the anthropology class because I had a class just before anthropology, and I'd get to the auditorium, and in fact, it was late, and so I was usually in the back row. But they got to know me because she brought a visiting professor, anthropology professor, to talk to the class. And he studied festivals, and he had studied Trinidad and Tobago Carnival. He'd been to Trinidad several times. And he made some comments about Carnival, and I actually put my hand up from the back of the room and said that he was incorrect. And in fact, that he had gotten a couple of things wrong. And when the class ended, she asked me to come down, and I thought I was going to get into trouble. But actually, the visiting professor thanked me for making the comments and invited me to sit on a panel with him because he was doing some panel on Carnival. And so I got reinforced for actually doing the work. That being said, they must have written very great letters because I got the scholarship. So my 3rd and 4th years, my parents got off the hook because I got a Commonwealth scholarship from Canada granted to Trinidad on my behalf. So the Canadian government paid for my 3rd and 4th years in the university. In my senior year, I had to do an honors thesis, and I'd heard there was a thesis prize. And so I'm now working on mom's plan, aim for the stars. And so I decided I'm getting that thesis prize. So I put together a proposal. I'm doing an evaluation study. I'm an undergrad, but I'm doing an evaluation study. I'm evaluating a program in the English department using the scientific method that I've learned in psychology. And I had 2 advisors, one in psychology and one in English. And I learned about how things go awry and how university systems work when they met for the first time. So the first meeting of all 3 of us was in late October in my senior year. And the English professor who ran the program was an assistant professor. He was not yet tenured. My psych advisor was a full professor, fully tenured. And so the English professor said that he didn't want the study published if the evaluation did not show success, because he thought that it would affect his chances of getting tenure. My psychology professor said, well, I can't agree to that. Now I'm sitting out there saying, I wasn't even planning on publishing this study. This is an undergraduate thesis. I don't think it's even going to be publishable, right? But the psych professor would not agree to the condition. The English professor walked out. And so there went my thesis. I could not evaluate that program anymore. I walked home to my apartment. I walked back to my apartment that day. That was a sunny afternoon in October. I walked back in tears, right? And I remember, though, that mom said, if you aim for the stars and you miss, you'll land in the treetops. I'm like, I can't do that thesis. I cobbled together a thesis and I put that thesis together. I continued to work very hard. And lo and behold, I did not get the thesis prize, no surprise. But I actually found out when I graduated that I had won the gold medal in psychology. I did not know the gold medal had existed. I wasn't working for it, but I got it anyway. Again, this idea of hard work, paying off even when you don't think it is. So Western then gave me a scholarship to do my master's degree, but I owed Trinidad 2 years service for the Commonwealth scholarship. And I couldn't get anybody in the Ministry of Education to respond to my request to delay my service. So I found out who the person was who could make the decision, called his secretary and actually arranged to see him. I met him at 7 in the morning. He used to get in the office early. And I was saying that, Trinidad's going to get somebody with a master's degree, not just a bachelor's. A bachelor's degree doesn't give you much and stuff. And I pleaded and pleaded. And eventually, to get rid of me, said, if you want to go back to Canada and do the master's, just go. I took that. I went, bought a ticket, flew back to Canada and did my master's degree. Came back to Trinidad and basically got told, well, we have a job for your teaching in Pinal. Now I live in Diego Martin. Somebody was going on maternity leave for 3 weeks and stuff. So I got a job at St. Mary's, taught there and was the school counselor for a year, left that, and then was working for Daniel's Educational Community School because Trinidad had nothing for me. And while I was working for that, I actually then applied to do a PhD. And I was going to go back and do a PhD in Ed Psych, which is what I'd done my master's in. But a friend was at Berkeley at the time, and he sent me the Berkeley catalog, and I read about school psychology for the first time. Clinical training and research training. And since I was planning on coming back to Trinidad, I actually applied to school psych programs. I'll now just skip through a number of years and some highlights and stuff. Things. First is I get into Berkeley and I get a teaching assistantship. So I had to work all my way through school, research and teaching assistantships, because that paid the rent. Now, when you get a research assistantship or teaching assistantship, it also pays tuition. In those days, it did not. So I had a teaching assistantship which could pay my rent, but I didn't have the money for the tuition. Lindianne Rich, who was a music teacher at St. Mary's, and I used to work very hard in music, lent me the money to pay my first year's tuition at Berkeley for my PhD from her husband's life insurance. She trusted me, I had worked well and stuff. And so this is a teacher who's believing in you, right? And so I have paid her back, you know. In my third year at Berkeley, I went to ask my advisor to write a letter for me for a fellowship, you know, again, because every year I'm trying to find out how am I paying for the next year. And she said to me, have you finished your research paper that you're supposed to finish last semester? And I said, well, no, I'm a little behind and stuff. And she said, so what am I supposed to put in the letter? That I like you, that you're good looking and stuff. So, I mean, you need to work. So it's a message that I kept getting again and again. She did write a good letter. I interviewed it. So I finished. Then I interviewed at Penn State while I was still collecting dissertation data. And based on my advisor's recommendation, I talked about my research agenda, not about my research study. My dissertation was not, I had only done my pilot. I was still collecting data for the main study. And I interviewed one place and I got hired, Penn State. So I got hired. At Penn State, there are most universities, there are 3 reviews to tenure. And at Penn State was years 2, 4, and 6. And we're supposed to publish 2 articles a year on average. I was trying, but getting rejected. So I started at Penn State in 94. My first article was accepted in 96. It didn't come out until 97. So in my first review, right, which was fall of 95, the committee voted 2 yes to keep me, 2 no to not keep me. So I got to stay. Other people with 4 no's had to leave. In year 4, I had 3 articles, not 8. The committee voted 2 yes and 2 no. And I got to stay. They made me then do an informal review in year 5. In year 5, the committee voted 4 no. Because I had 6 articles. So year 5, I should have about 10. 4 no. I only got to stay because it was an informal review. So when and in fact, the dean told me, you start looking for another job. You're not going to get tenure. So I stayed. I didn't look for another job, but I had continued to submit things. And when I actually went up for tenure in year 6, I went up with 14 articles. So I got tenure. And it's about that time I really got involved with APA. So the School Psychology Division 16 had asked me to serve on the Committee of Ethnic Minority Affairs. And in about 2001, they asked me to chair that committee. And so I actually, as chair of that committee, was going to APA meetings to liaison to the APA Commission on Ethnic Minority Affairs. What I did not know at the time is that people rotate through these committees, right? And they, higher and higher. So I was a liaison to this committee. Then my name, Division 16, put my name forward for an APA-wide committee. And somebody who had been on the Committee on Ethnic Minority Affairs while I was a liaison was on this new committee, the Committee on Division APA Relations. And she said to the people in that room, apparently, that I had worked harder as a liaison than people on the committee. And so I actually got chosen for that committee. And that committee gave me visibility within APA because that committee, the Committee on APA Division Relations, puts on the leadership training for the new president-elects of divisions. APA has 54 divisions. It puts on the training, and so the presidential trio, all the members of the board of directors come through that conference, and I chaired that committee in my last year. In my last year on that committee, I then got asked for my CV by the chair of another committee, the Committee on Psychological Tests and Assessments, looked at it, put my CV forward, and then I got chosen to be on the Committee on Psychological Tests and Assessments, my second APA committee. While I was on that committee, I then got appointed. That committee appoints or works to help appoint the people who do the standards for educational and psychological testing. There's a book that we have in the United States called the Standards for Educational and Psychological Testing, which governs the Wechsler scales, the IQ test, state tests, state and national tests, the SAT and the ACT. All of these tests that are used commercially, personnel tests for in companies, they have to meet the standards. And the standards are put together every 15 years or so. And so 1999, the 1999 version had been out. So in 2008, they were putting together a committee to do the updated version. And I gave them school psychologists' names who wanted to be on it. But then they called me and asked me to be on it. And I said, well, I didn't give my name, but then they harassed me and I agreed to serve. And that gave me even more visibility. And so I got elected president of Division 16. I got elected after I finished my presidential term to be the council of representatives of APA. So I was Division 16 representative for 2 terms. After the Committee on Psychological Test and Assessment, I got elected because those committees were appointed. I got elected to my first APA elected committee, the Board of Educational Affairs. And then I got elected to the Board of Scientific Affairs, which governs science for APA. And I actually chaired that committee in my third year. And in my third year on that committee is also my last year's council rep, Division 16, asked me to run for president for the board of directors, because very few school psychologists have been on the board of directors. The first one was in 1986, which was my advisor. She served 86, 87, 88. And then there was this guy who had gotten his PhD in school psychology in 1966 when I was still active at Richmond Street Boys. And he saw himself as a forensic psychologist, even though his PhD was in school psychology. And so anyway, I ran, and because of, I think, the visibility and the fact that I'd been working hard and people knew me to work hard and to get along well with others, I got elected to the Board of Educational Affairs, the Board of Directors. And I served on that board for 3 years, and I had a reputation, I think, for being honest with individuals and so forth. And it's interesting because I wasn't planning on running for president. People have been trying to tell me I should have, and then I decided to run. And APA Council is much like, it's political. It's done like Congress, right? So that's why there's a Council of Representatives. So each of the 54 divisions have representatives. The 50 states have representatives. The territories, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Guam, they have representatives. The provinces of Canada have representatives on council, and so forth. There's 170 people or something like that. And they have caucuses, the education and training caucus and so forth. So I was, I worked well with people. There was one woman in the race. I was the only minority in the race. And I think the current socio-historical moment helped me. I will be the second Black male president of APA. The Women's Caucus endorsed me rather than first, not the woman who was on the presidential ballot the year I ran. So I'm going to close and say I've been very successful in my career, but it has been on the basis of hard work every step of the way. When I did not work hard, I was not successful. I did my master's thesis proposal. I was supposed to get it done. I didn't get it done. I procrastinated it. I wrote it Sunday night and turned it in on a Monday. And my advisor handed it back to me on the Tuesday with 5 words. No thoughts shown, please redo, and stuff. So the message that I've gotten throughout my career is that hard work matters. And that's a good thing because I live in America and I'm a Black man in America who's lucky to be still here. In December of 1989, 3 of us, Black males, were in a car coming back from church. Police were looking for some drug dealers and they pulled us over. I spent half an hour with my friends kneeling at the side of the road with guns, police with guns drawn, right? And knowing what I know now, that could very easily have been the last moments of my life, right? I mean, I didn't know enough to be afraid at that point. I was new to America. When at Penn State, as I told you, they tried not to give me tenure. When I came to Berkeley, they tried to talk me out of going up for full professor. Even though I had 54 publications at the time. In fact, just last year, they put up somebody 27 publications for full professor and gave it to him. And I recommended him for the same merit that they recommended me for. And I had 127 new publications. He had a total of 27 publications total. And the university gave me a bigger merit than he did, although the School of Ed did not. So if it were up to the School of Ed, it would not have been there. So my success has been due to hard work. Instead of publishing 2 to 3 articles a year once I got tenure, I have been publishing 10 to 12 and then 12 to 15, right? This level of work has protected me from racism and discrimination. It's not that it doesn't exist, but it's hard to argue against the work because I have a record that speaks. And so in closing, I'll say my mother's advice proved correct. Aim for the stars and you can end in the treetops. In 1978, the Music Festival was being interviewed on the radio. And he had come from England and he was asked, was there any performer in the festival who stood out for him? He indicated that the St. Mary's College Choir stood out for him. And the reporter said, why? And he responded that they were professionals. And the reporter said, they're not professionals, they're school kids. They don't get paid for what they do. And the adjudicator said, to my mind, a professional is not somebody who gets paid for what they do. It's not just getting paid for your work doesn't make you a professional. What makes you a professional is making sure your work never falls below a certain standard. He went on to say, he says, the St. Mary's College Choir did not win every class they were in, but every time they came out on stage, I knew I was going to hear a good performance. And that is why I see them as professionals. And that definition of professionals has become a guiding light for me. I share this definition of professionalism with my doctoral students, and I ask them to take it to heart. Do your best to ensure that your work, although not perfect, does not fall below a certain standard of excellence. This is the message that we need to communicate to young kids today. You need to work hard, and in fact, it will pay off. If you believe in it, it will pay off. It may not get you exactly where you want to go, but it will get you further than you would have if you don't. Thanks again for the invitation to speak to you all today and for your kind attention. And I think I'm willing to take questions from anybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Frank. The floor is now opened. But I want to tell you this. Okay, you're in the United States.
Yes.
There again, our loss to have you. How are you planning to give us some of what your knowledge imparted? That's one, besides doing things like this. And two, you have a lot of collaborators. I call them out. I don't see Trinidad and Tobago there. How do we get on your list?
Okay, let me start with the first question first. Trinidad and Tobago continues to be near and dear to me. And I actually, when I made the decision, as I said, when I applied to graduate school, my plan was to come back to the PhD, to come back to Trinidad. Over the course of my 6 years in the PhD program, it became very clear that if I wanted to continue to do research, coming back to Trinidad would not have been, I would not have been able to do that if I came back to Trinidad. And so I made the decision to stay in the States because of that. But I did not give up my commitment to Trinidad. And for those of you who may not know this, I actually, in my very first sabbatical, came and spent a year in Trinidad working at the Ministry of Education. This was in 2001, 2002. It was 9/11, because I was scheduled to fly on September 13th of that year. And on September 11th is when the planes went into the towers in New York. I was in New York. I'd driven into New York on the 10th of September. During that year, I actually collected data in Trinidad, and Trinidad, I normed for Trinidad 2 teacher rating scales, a parent rating scale, so that Trinidad and Tobago, they can diagnose using ADHD and so forth, using local norms. They can diagnose conduct disorder. We normed at the adolescent level, forms 1 to 5, we normed the Reynolds Adolescent Depression Screener. We normed the revised child manifest anxiety scale. So I've actually, so the Ministry of Education got a series of manuals that I did. We also did norming work for reading scores and so forth. This was supposed to continue. The government changed, plans changed, but I have always been willing and ready to come back. The government has just never gotten it together. And I will say, though, that the lasting thing about it is that the Central Guidance Unit, right, the Student Support Services Unit, I think it's now called, became the Student Support Services Unit when I was doing that work, because I told them they needed to integrate. So that's a contribution I made. They now have some school psychologists, clinical psychologists and stuff working there. They didn't have any at the time. I think they had 1 clinical psychologist at the time. So I have continued to give to Trinidad, and I will continue. I'm actually on the advisory board of the PDIC, the Psychoeducational Diagnostic and Intervention Clinic that was opened at UWI. I'm on the external advisory board. So Wendy, I am giving back, and I am more than willing to give back. With regard to the partnerships, I was speaking to current partnerships. So I actually have I've published on Trinidad and Tobago. I have published on Jamaica. I did not include them in that list, not because I am not willing, but in fact, I do not have active partnerships with people that they're right now, but I am always willing to do that.
Good. I didn't know that, and I'm sure a lot of us didn't know that either, Now, another thing, a message or a tip for underachievers. I find I'm seeing a lot of young men and women who are not achieving, they're dropping off the radar. They're turning to a lot of marijuana. I said the problem will still be here in spite of that. Right. They're not, I do not know if they know how to save their money to sort of take it step by step. Maybe they want everything to happen now and it can't, right? So I want a particular message to take to those young people who are not able to achieve for whatever reason, maybe their background, the parents who give them so much, you know, and they do not know how to earn something. I want a message for those children, those young people.
Yeah.
If you can, you know.
Yeah. I have no magic bullets, but here's what I will say. I mean, my last trip to Trinidad was in September of 2019 when I came down, when the PDIC opened, when and I came and I spoke. And I actually quoted Eric Williams about the future of the nation being the book bags of the children.
Right.
And here's what I would say is that, and one of the things I said then, we expect sometimes linear development. We have these expectations for students, and we think that the ones who are doing well when they're young are the ones who will be doing well when they're old. And so the ones who are not doing as well, we write off as not competent, right? And we don't believe in them. So certainly my St. Mary's teachers would not see me sitting here today. I would not have been predicted to be here today. In fact, when I finished A-level, when I had signed up, when I was in my upper six, you know, you could become an assistant teacher, assistant in name because you taught your own class. It was assistant in salary, I guess. And they didn't take my name because I wasn't supposed to pass my A-levels because I wasn't working. They took the names of many of kids who were in school with me, you know, the son from the central bank and the Chief Justice's son and these people who were also in my A-level class. I passed off of my subjects. These students did not. I ended up teaching at St. Mary's right after A-levels because they had to come and ask me to do it because the people they had signed up had not passed the subjects, right? I may not have gotten great grades, but I did pass. I got the history prize with a C. I'm not proud of that, but I got the history prize at St. Mary's the year I was there. A-levels history prize with a C. Now, what I will say is, think of the kids, many of these kids who in Trinidad are called Duncy, and then they go to the United States. Right? And then what happens is, you're hearing that they're a teacher, they're a lawyer, and engineer. And our belief in Trinidad was, oh my God, the standards in America must be really low, right? That's what I said it myself, right? And I do think that in some ways our standard is low, but the other thing is they give you second chances, right? They give you second chances, and that's something we are not doing in Trinidad. So we write off these kids, right? And stuff. And so the first thing we need to say to them is that we believe in you, and in fact, we will continue to give you chances, right? This is what it is. I teach, I'm an academic. I get rejection still to this day, just because I'm a full professor. I submit to a journal, it gets turned down. I can go on sulk for 6 months. That's not going to help me. No, I send it to another journal. So another path. One of my students, my doctoral students, he studies hope. And the hope theory, hope is made up of two things. In Snyder's hope theory, he uses that as the basis for his work. One is your belief in your capacity to do work if you try. So similar to self-efficacy. And the other one is the ability to find different pathways. So if this pathway is closed, if this road is closed, how am I going to get to where I want to go? I don't give up and go back home. I find another route. And those are the messages that we need to be giving to kids. And we need to be giving to them from elementary school.
Yes.
Not when they've done O-levels or now it's CXC and not passed any subjects. We need to be giving them those messages from young.
Right. Okay, people, the floor is open to you as well. Ask Dr. Worrell a question. Ask Professor a question.
Wendy, we have two questions. The first one is, for Dr. Worrell, can you speak to the issue of the curriculum not being relevant to young adult males? What are we doing about updating the curriculum? And the second one is, as APA President-elect, how can TTAP leverage your role to improve mental health and school psychology in TNT and the Caribbean?
Okay, so let's take the first one about the issue of the curriculum not being relevant. This is a big thing that's going on in the United States right now, right? So this idea of relevance of curriculum. And It's not that I don't think it's important, but I think we put too much emphasis on it. Because I would argue that the curriculum today, the Trinidad and Tobago has today, is much more relevant than the curriculum that many of us who are on this call had when we were in schools, right? When I taught in Trinidad, CXC was there. When I was going to school, it was actually Cambridge exams, right? And so that one of the things I think that is really important for kids to understand is it really does not matter. When I got my PhD here, does that mean in the United States? Does that mean I can't come and work in Trinidad and Tobago, right? The goal of curriculum in many cases is to give you skill sets, right? It's not, so we think that what I do in my Form 4 math class may not have any direct relationship to what I'm doing in the bank, but I have learned to work with numbers. That's the important thing. I've learned to manipulate numbers in certain ways. And we need to teach people that, in fact, the curriculum, it's a way of exercising the mind. That's what curriculum is. Now, that being said, we need to have people see themselves in the curriculum. It's really important in the United States for African Americans and Latinx and American Indians and ethnic minority groups to see themselves in the curriculum because they don't get to. But in Trinidad, while we may not see ourselves in the curriculum as much, we also have things that they don't have here. They have had one Barack Obama. We have had how many Black prime ministers, right? And stuff, so that we are seeing things in different ways and we can tie those things into what's going on. So if allow kids to bring their projects, if you're choosing to do a project, bring something that you think is more relevant do your project on something. So yes, school needs to do something, but we can't allow the fact that the curriculum may take a while to change to say that I should not invest, right? So that's my answer to that. With regard to leveraging the role to improve mental health and school psychology in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean, what I will say is that you all will know better how to do that than I can. I am willing, and when Wendy asked me, as I said, she reminded me that I don't know if she thought I was going to say no, because she reminded me about the recorder ensemble, and I had to tell her, Wendy, you didn't have to go back that long and remind me how old I am. We actually we were involved with Stentor when I was an adult. So we didn't have to go that far back.
Okay.
So I am willing and able. So the thing about it is, I think ultimately one of the things when I did the project with the Ministry of Education, there are a number of things on tap that never did come to pass, right? That hope maybe now that I'm going to be president of APA, we can get those things back on the table. We did those norms that I talked about. Those norms need to be updated. They've never been. They are supposed to be updated. I spoke to PDIC. We have talked, and then when COVID hit, we're supposed to, in fact, norm the Wexler scales in Trinidad so that you are actually not using American norms, but you're using Trinidad norms. So that's something that PDIC was thinking about doing, again, before COVID hit. We need to, as I said, the person, and I don't know if he's still there, but when I was there in 2019, the person who was running the Student Support Services Unit was a Trinidadian who had gotten a PhD in special ed. He was retired and he was back in Trinidad. He had hired clinical psychologists, he had hired school psychologists. They're getting on the radar. We need to actually make psychology sort of a household word in Trinidad. That's one of the things we say in the US, you want to make psychology a household word. And we talked about setting up at the University of the West Indies campus. Part of the project was to actually start a master's degree in school psychology at the Trinidad campus of UWI, because they would have then been providing school psychologists to the English-speaking Caribbean, right? And that never happened. Again, so all of these plans, right? So the political forces at work. And I am willing to speak out. I am missing visiting Trinidad, so I am hoping that in 2022, my presidential year, will be traveling again, and I'll get to come to Trinidad. But I'm more than willing to be as helpful as I can in any way that you all see fit.
Yes.
With the caveat, I've been already put on notice. I have somebody at APA now who handles my calendar and who told me I can't accept anything without letting her know, because she has to check my APA calendar first. But so I have a handler now. For the next 3 years, I have a handler. So.
Professor Worrell.
Yes.
Yes, we have a question from Facebook because we're also streaming live on Facebook. And
Oh,
the
wow.
person is from Belize and they want to know, would you help to develop a PhD program with UE?
Would I help to develop a PhD program with UE in Belize or UE?
No, I think it's just UE. But the person is from Belize.
So I am more than willing. Again, as I said, we had talked about developing the master's program in school. So the reason we had talked about developing the master's program was that we wanted to, we felt there was a tremendous need for practitioners, right? And stuff. But there was also talk, again, the proposal had many pieces. And one of the pieces was Trinidad using, much like I got a Commonwealth scholarship, using that things to get people abroad and trained who would get PhDs who would come back to the country owing them service and stuff. So I'm more than willing to help, as I said. If in fact there's any way in which I can help, I'm more than willing to do that. It'd be great. I mean, I have, my students keep saying, aren't you gonna take us to Trinidad someday and help us? We are willing to go teach anything we can. I have lots of my students who would love to come to Trinidad. I have colleagues who would love to come to Trinidad and stuff. If we can do, if we can be helpful. So maybe teaching things in the summer and those kinds of things, so, but yeah, of course, I'd be more than definite. And to Amanda, I saw Amanda sent me a direct message. So Amanda, I will say, thank you very much for your congratulations and good to hear from you.
Do we have any more questions, people, before we close? Going once, twice, 3 times? All right. Professor Worrell.
I was trying to get to a mic. You're still muted, Anna.
We're not hearing her.
Yes. So, yeah, hi.
Okay.
There you go, Anna. Yeah.
Right.
I know I wanted to say congratulations too, but Wendy, they started at 5 or it was supposed to start at 6?
No. It's 5 to 6 every first Sunday.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw 6 to 7
No.
on one of my notes. All
And then
right.
I think
But I came in at the end and I heard, so it's the same format every Sunday?
No, the first Sunday of every month.
The first Sunday of every month. Okay. All right.
And to
Thanks.
Diane,
Another question, Diane.
So Diane, I will say that I would like to think that me being Trini helped me get elected to the presidency. So oftentimes, council has 170 people. The board is much smaller. There are about 12 of us. And sometimes the board, we get information that the whole council doesn't see and the lawyers say we can't share it and all of that. And so sometimes we have to make decisions. Now, council is the highest body and they are upset because they feel they should be able to tell the board what to do. But sometimes the board has to act and tell council that we know you want us to do A, but we're doing B because that's in the best interest of the association, given what we know. And there are times when we've had to say that. When I was on the board and we've had to say that to the council, nobody on the board would want to say it, sometimes even the president. And I was like, I'll say it.
Good.
I will say it. And so there was a time when I actually had to, we needed somebody to leave the room because he was threatening to sue and the lawyer wanted to talk to us and he couldn't run the room since he was one of the people threatening to sue. And so we had to make a motion for him to leave the room and nobody in the board would do it. And I went and I made it and he was very upset. He stopped talking to me for several years and stuff. But I made it, he left the room. We now speak to each other again. And the thing is, so my Trini roots have given me the speaking truth to power. We get that from Calypso and, and stuff. I remember when the bomb had a picture of a donkey on the front page of the paper with Eric Williams' face, and riding him was the prime ministers of Jamaica, Barbados, and somewhere else. So that I think has informed me, right? So Frank by name, Frank by nature.
Good.
Get to do it with a Caribbean accent.
Professor Worrell, we have another question from Facebook. From Dr. Kieran Clay. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today, Professor. I would like to know if you could speak on modifying the training that teachers are exposed to regarding having the skills needed to address the learning needs of all children.
Right. Yeah, I do think that one of the things that we don't do enough of is we don't teach teachers enough about developmental psychology, developmental issues. So we spend, I think teaching is a really difficult task. I've been a teacher, and I think, and they get beat up a lot, and they often don't get the best salaries. So let's start there. But teachers are really the backbone of any society, because the education system, the strength of your education system is so for those of us, whether you become a psychologist, an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer, or you know, or in point of fact, somebody who's working in the Ministry of Education, or somebody who's doing a trade, you go through school. So teachers are really careful. We need to teach more about effective teaching, which includes having high expectations for all students, but particularly students from the margins, low income, and stuff like that. We've got to put aside our animus and learn, because there are behaviors that high expectation teachers engage in, and those should be taught as standard part of teacher training. Mm-hmm. They need to be taught about classroom management, right? Lots of what happens in a classroom, teachers who are not being effective, is because they're spending so much of their time managing behavior that they are not teaching stuff. So a lot of class time. So we need to teach much more effective classroom management, and in fact, teach principals how to in fact support teachers effectively in that. And then ultimately we need to teach teachers about basic educational and developmental psychological principles that will affect the kids because they need to know how to work with the kids in front of them, not just how to teach math, right? But how to deal with Johnny today when Johnny's a little depressed, or Johnny's a little angry, and so forth. That needs to be part of the training as well.
We have another Facebook question.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Kathy Sandy Thompson. Hello, Professor Frank C. Worrell. Thank you for your contribution and your new role at the APA. I am Kathleen Sandy Thompson from TNT, a PhD student at Western University, doing studies in education with a focus on critical policy, equity, and leadership studies. I would like to know how students can navigate the challenges of getting published without the support of their supervisor.
That's a hard one. What I would say is I remind my students, and I encourage my students to seek mentors elsewhere as well, that in fact you can find mentors outside of your. One of the things that Zoom and Facebook and many of these things, allow us to do now, WhatsApp, is to actually reach out to other people. And so if your supervisor is not being supportive, I would suggest reaching out to others who can help you and may be supportive. And it may take a while to reach out. And by the way, to the person who just asked this question, if you are the person who emailed me asking me to participate in your study, send it again, because when they said Western University, I remember getting something. I get over 200 emails a day, and sometimes when things happen, so I had a death for COVID recently, and I've been doing a lot of family stuff. So my students all know that if I don't respond in 2 or 3 days, that they need to send the email again. So if you're the person who asked me about doing that interview with you for your dissertation, please send it again. I will pull it back up in my system. Be persistent.
Okay, may I close now then? Once
Yes,
there are no
sure.
more questions. Well, Professor Worrell, on behalf of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Psychologists, my own behalf, and as well on behalf of everyone else present here this afternoon, we express our gratitude and thank you very much for taking time to share the knowledge you gained over the years with us. We have gleaned so much from what you imparted. I want you to know that you have a lot of things to bring back on the table, bring to the table in 2022 when you're president. We take all this knowledge that you gave us, disseminate the information as we practice the craft of psychology in Trinidad and Tobago to the best of our ability. Thank you so much, Frank. And I have a little piece at the end to play for you. Ladies and gentlemen, members, remember, we will be on again on Sunday, the 7th of March, 2021, to continue our virtual mental health platform series. Thank you all for attending. Thank you again, Frank. There's Desmond. That's no. Yeah. And no, still not yet.
Wendy, one of the things you may not know is that the APA asked me, the president, the 2014 president, when I was on council,
Yes.
asked me to start a council choir.
Well,
So APA has a council choir that actually has been singing. I've been conducting it since 2014.
Oh, good. Remember you brought the choir to Trinidad, eh? It's the
Yes.
Juniata choir. Yes. You see? So I said, let me play this as Desmond was involved in this, arranged and performed by him. That's just for you, your friend.
Thank you very much. It
You're
was an honor to be invited, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay.
And so tell Desmond I say hi.
I'll do that. I'll do that. Okay, I'll do that. Sure. Okay, Frank. Goodbye.
I know.
Yes, bye-bye.
What happened?